The room smelled faintly of ozone and disinfectant, a sterile atmosphere masking the oppressive dread woven into the alien technology lining the walls. Captain James Harker, an Earth-born military veteran-turned-explorer, sat upright, his posture a testament to unyielding discipline despite the glowing restraints pinning his wrists to the chair. His steel-gray eyes scanned the room, taking in the strange symbols etched into the walls and the pulsing lights on a console that seemed alive, almost sentient. The interrogator entered, an imposing figure wrapped in a cloak of shifting hues that shimmered like liquid mercury. Its elongated limbs ended in delicate, clawed fingers, and its face was an unsettling mix of translucent skin revealing intricate veins and large, unblinking eyes that glowed faintly. This was a member of the Crothian Dominion, a race notorious across the galaxy for extracting information with chilling efficiency. "You are an anomaly," the Crothian said, its voice a discordant symphony of tones that seemed to echo in James's skull. "Human biology confounds even our most advanced scanners. Yet here you are, defiant." James raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a faint smirk. "Anomaly? That's just a fancy word for unpredictable, isn't it?" The Crothian tilted its head, clearly unaccustomed to prisoners responding with anything other than fear. "You misunderstand. This is not a compliment. It is a curiosity. Your kind should not have survived the neural inhibitor field. Yet you walked through it unscathed. I guess we humans are full of surprises," James said, leaning back as much as the restraints allowed. His casual tone belied the simmering anger within, a fire stoked by the knowledge that his crew was likely still stranded on the hostile planet outside, their fates uncertain. The Crothian stepped closer, its probing gaze never leaving him. "Your physiology is adaptive to a fault. But we will uncover your limits. Every species has them." James's smirk widened, though his muscles tensed imperceptibly. "If you're looking for limits, you're in for a long day." The Crothian's clawed fingers moved swiftly over the console, activating an array of instruments that emerged from the walls and ceiling. Some crackled with electricity, others hummed with low, ominous vibrations. One device, resembling a serpentine tendril, slithered closer to James, its metallic surface glinting under the dim light. "You will tell us the purpose of your mission," the Crothian said, its voice colder now, devoid of the earlier curiosity. "Or we will dismantle you, piece by piece, until there is nothing left but fragments of your defiance." James inhaled deeply, his mind racing. He'd been trained for this. Every fiber of his being screamed to remain calm, to assess the situation, and to find a way to turn the tables. He wasn't just fighting for his survival. He was buying time for his crew, who had scattered into the alien wilderness when the Crothians attacked. The tendril coiled closer, stopping mere inches from his face. James stared at it, unblinking, as his thoughts sharpened into a singular focus: endurance. "You think pain will break me?" he said, his voice steady. "We humans are built for pain. It's what makes us stronger." The Crothian paused, its alien mind processing the statement. Then, with a flick of its claw, the tendril surged forward, delivering a jolt of energy directly into James's chest. His body convulsed involuntarily, but when the tendril withdrew, he slumped back into the chair with a guttural chuckle. "Is that all you've got?" James said, his voice raspier now but still carrying that unshakable defiance. The Crothian leaned closer, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You mock us, yet you do not comprehend the severity of your predicament." "Oh, I comprehend it just fine," James replied. "You think you're holding all the cards. But here's the thing about humans, we don't play by the rules." The Crothian straightened, its fingers hesitating over the console. It wasn't fear, it was calculation. For a species as advanced as the Crothians, who thrived on precision and predictability, the unpredictable nature of humans was an enigma they struggled to unravel. James's smirk faded, replaced by a steely resolve. "You want to know what makes us dangerous? It's not our biology. It's not our weapons. It's that we don't stop. You can tear us apart, throw us into the void, and we'll still find a way to fight back." The Crothian's silence was telling, a crack in its otherwise impenetrable demeanor. James seized the moment. Your kind doesn't understand what it's like to face extinction and survive, he continued. We've been through wars, plagues, famines, you name it. And every time, we've come out stronger. So go ahead. Do your worst. You're not going to break me. All you're doing is giving me more time to figure out how to beat you. The Crothian took a step back, its claws twitching. For the first time, it felt something it hadn't anticipated, unease. James felt it too, a shift in the room, subtle but undeniable. The Crothian wasn't just interrogating him. It was grappling with the realization that humans were far more resilient than it had assumed. You have no allies here, the Crothian said finally, though its tone lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. Your kind is alone, a primitive species floundering in a galaxy far beyond its comprehension. James chuckled again, a sound filled with equal parts amusement and defiance. You think we're alone? Look around. This room, this interrogation, it's not just about me. It's about what humans represent. And I promise you this, we're never truly alone. Not as long as we carry that fire within us. The Crothian stared at him for a long moment before turning back to its console. The tendril retracted, the hum of the instruments fading into an uneasy silence. James exhaled slowly, his mind racing as he catalogued every detail of the room, every potential weakness in his restraints. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And as long as he drew breath, he would find a way to turn the tide. The Crothian may have thought it held the upper hand, but James knew better. They were about to learn the hard way that underestimating a human was the gravest mistake they could ever make. The silence in the chamber was palpable, broken only by the faint hum of alien machinery. Captain James Harker sat motionless, his mind racing despite the outward calm he projected. The Crothian had left the room, its unnerving composure hinting at plans far more sinister than a mere interrogation. James flexed his fingers subtly, testing the glowing restraints around his wrists. His smirk lingered, but his thoughts were razor-sharp. In the absence of his captor, James's memory darted back to the brief but chaotic skirmish that led to this moment. His crew had been on a routine exploratory mission when their vessel was ambushed by a Crothian warship. The attack was swift and calculated, cutting through their defenses like a blade through fabric. Despite their efforts, James and a small portion of his team had been captured, dragged into the shadowy underbelly of Crothian territory. The door to the chamber hissed open, pulling James from his thoughts. Two new figures entered, each more unnerving than the last. One was a hulking Crothian enforcer, its massive frame dwarfing James's seated form. The other was a slighter figure, its translucent skin revealing a network of pulsating veins beneath. The smaller one, an analyst judging by its intricate headgear, spoke first. Captain James Harker, your species remains peculiar. We have extracted hundreds of genetic profiles from prisoners of war. Yet none of them exhibit the anomalies present in you. James cocked his head, forcing a grin. Must be my winning personality. The enforcer growled, its deep, guttural sound vibrating through the room. James noted its reaction carefully. Crothians, for all their technological superiority, had an obvious flaw, their pride. The analyst ignored the comment, turning instead to a control panel embedded in the wall. We will now proceed with Phase 2. Your nervous system will reveal what your tongue refuses to share. James's smirk faltered as metallic tendrils emerged from the walls, their ends sparking with energy. He tensed, bracing for the worst. The tendrils snaked closer, their cold, unyielding surfaces brushing against his temples and chest. The first surge hit him like lightning, sharp and unrelenting. His muscles seized, his vision blurred, but James held on to a single thought: endure. His teeth clenched as the electricity coursed through him, and when it stopped, he exhaled sharply, a pained chuckle escaping his lips. Is that the best you've got? He rasped, his voice hoarse but defiant. The analyst's head tilted, its glowing eyes narrowing. Pain tolerance is irrelevant. Neural synchronization will extract the information regardless. James's mind raced as the tendrils prepared for another surge. He needed a way out, something, anything, to disrupt the process. Then, through the haze of pain and adrenaline, an idea sparked. The Crothians were meticulous, relying on precision in all things. Their reliance on technology, though advanced, made them vulnerable to unpredictability. If James could disrupt the synchronization process, even for a moment, it might buy him the opening he needed. As the next surge hit, James focused his thoughts, forcing himself to visualize memories that were deliberately chaotic, images of Earth's dense jungles, crowded marketplaces, and thunderous battlefields. He layered them with sensations: rain-soaked skin, the smell of burning fuel, the sound of boots on gravel. The tendrils hesitated, their synchronization faltering. The analyst frowned, its claws twitching over the control panel. "What is this? Your thoughts are disorganized, nonsensical." James grinned through the pain. "Welcome to the human experience." The enforcer growled again, stepping forward, but the analyst raised a hand to stop it. "No. This requires a finer approach. Increase the neural load. Overwhelm his defenses." The tendrils tightened their grip, and a new wave of energy coursed through James. This time, it wasn't just physical pain, it was mental, an invasive force tearing through his memories and thoughts. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms as he resisted the pull. And then, he felt it, a shift in the tendrils' rhythm, a faint lag in their synchronization. His chaotic thoughts were working, disrupting the process just enough to create instability. James seized the moment. "You think you're in control," he said through gritted teeth. "But you don't understand what you're dealing with." The analyst's gaze snapped to him, its expression a mix of curiosity and frustration. "Explain." James leaned forward as much as the restraints allowed, his voice steady despite the pain. "Humans don't just survive, we adapt. You can probe my mind all you want, but you'll never understand it. Because our greatest strength isn't in what we know. It's in what we can imagine." The analyst hesitated, its claws frozen mid-motion. For a species as logical as the Crothians, imagination was a foreign concept, an unpredictable variable that defied their calculated approach. The enforcer, growing impatient, stepped closer. "Enough of this. Let me break him." But before it could act, the tendrils began to malfunction, sparks flying as James's chaotic thoughts overwhelmed the system. The restraints around his wrists flickered, their glow dimming. James didn't wait. With a burst of adrenaline, he pulled free, the metal restraints snapping under his sheer determination. The enforcer lunged, but James was faster, grabbing a loose tendril and driving its sparking end into the alien's chest. The enforcer roared, its massive body convulsing before collapsing to the ground. The analyst scrambled to retreat, but James wasn't done. He ripped the control panel from the wall, sending a cascade of sparks flying. The room plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of the fallen restraints. James stood amidst the chaos, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with resolve. "You wanted to know what makes humans dangerous?" he said, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. "Now you know." He turned toward the door, his mind already calculating his next move. His crew was still out there, and the Crothians weren't going to stop hunting them. But James had a plan, a reckless, impossible plan that only a human could devise. As he stepped over the enforcer's motionless form, he couldn't help but grin. The Crothians thought they had captured a lone human, a fragile anomaly. They had no idea they had unleashed something far more dangerous. Something they would never be able to contain. The corridors of the Crothian vessel were an ominous labyrinth, dimly lit and pulsing with an eerie blue light. Captain James Harker moved quickly but silently, his ears tuned to every faint sound. His wrists ached from the broken restraints, and his muscles screamed in protest, but his mind was sharp, focused. He wasn't just trying to escape, he was planning his counterstrike. The Crothians had underestimated him, their arrogance blinding them to the reality of human resilience. They thought their advanced technology and superior strength made them invincible, but James had turned their own systems against them. Now, he intended to do it again, on a much larger scale. As he rounded a corner, James paused, pressing himself against the cold metal wall. Two Crothian guards stood at an intersection ahead, their conversation a mix of guttural growls and clicks. James didn't need to understand their language to know what they were discussing. Reaching down, he grabbed a shard of the broken control panel he had torn apart earlier. It wasn't much, but in James's hands it was a weapon. He crouched low, his breath steady, his movements precise. When he lunged, it was with the calculated ferocity of a predator. The first guard didn't have time to react. James struck quickly, driving the shard into its exposed neck. The alien let out a choked gurgle before collapsing. The second guard swung its weapon, a sleek, glowing staff, but James was already moving. He ducked under the arc of the swing, grabbing the staff and twisting it out of the guard's grasp. With a single, brutal motion, he used the staff against the guard, sending a crackling surge of energy through its body. The alien fell, twitching, to the ground. James stood over the two fallen Crothians, his chest heaving. He grabbed the staff and one of their communication devices, clipping it to his belt. Every advantage counted. He tapped the device, cycling through frequencies until he heard a familiar voice crackle through the static. "This is Lieutenant Marquez. Can anyone hear me? Repeat, this is Marquez." James's heart leapt. "Marquez, it's Harker. I'm alive. What's your status?" "Captain? Thank God. We're holed up in a storage bay, but they've got patrols sweeping the area. We've lost Simmons and Park. It's just me and Lieutenant Gray now." James's jaw tightened at the news. "Sit tight. I'm coming to you. We're not leaving anyone behind." Marquez hesitated. "Sir, this ship is crawling with Crothians. How are we supposed to?" James cut him off. "We're not just escaping, Lieutenant. We're taking this ship." There was a long pause before Marquez responded. "Understood, sir. We'll be ready." James shut off the communicator and tightened his grip on the staff. His plan was insane, but that was precisely why it could work. The Crothians weren't expecting a counterattack. They believed humans were weak, broken by captivity. James was about to show them how wrong they were. Moving through the corridors, he avoided patrols, using the shadows to his advantage. Each step brought him closer to the storage bay, and to his crew. He passed alien technology that hummed with an almost malevolent energy, the ship's organic design pulsing like a living thing. When he finally reached the storage bay, James found Marquez and Gray barricaded behind crates. They looked battered but determined, their eyes lighting up when they saw their captain. "Captain," Marquez said, saluting despite the situation. "Glad to see you. Glad to see you both alive," James replied, gripping his lieutenant's shoulder. "We're getting out of here. But first, we're taking the fight to them." Gray, a wiry engineer with a sharp mind, frowned. "Sir, this ship is massive. Even if we sabotage their systems, there are too many of them." James shook his head. "We don't need to take out the entire crew. Just the command center. If we disable their navigation and communication, they'll be dead in the water." Marquez nodded. "And then what? Blow it up?" "No," James said, a grim smile spreading across his face. "We're going to steal it." Gray blinked. "You're serious?" "Deadly," James replied. "This ship is a weapon. If we can take control, we can turn it against the Crothians." Marquez and Gray exchanged a glance, then nodded. "What's the plan, sir?" James laid it out quickly. They would move in 3 phases: disrupt the ship's internal security, take control of the command center, and use the Crothians' own technology to override the ship's systems. It was a long shot, but it was their best chance. The first step was disabling the internal security grid. Gray took the lead, using her engineering expertise to hack into a nearby terminal. She worked quickly, her fingers flying over the alien interface. The Crothian symbols were unlike anything she had seen before, but she adapted, using her intuition and ingenuity to bypass the system's defenses. "Got it," Gray said, a triumphant grin on her face. "The security grid is down. We've got a window, but it won't last long." "Good work," James said. "Let's move." The 3 of them advanced toward the command center, their movements coordinated and deliberate. Along the way, they encountered more guards, but James's strategy and their combined skills allowed them to take out the Crothians with minimal noise. When they reached the command center, they found it heavily guarded. James signaled for Gray to create a diversion, while he and Marquez flanked the guards. Gray nodded, planting an explosive charge on a nearby wall. The explosion drew the guards away, and James and Marquez struck with precision, taking them out one by one. When the dust settled, the command center was theirs. Gray joined them, quickly accessing the main console. "I can disable the ship's communication and navigation from here," she said, her hands already at work. "Do it," James ordered. As Gray worked, the ship shuddered, alarms blaring. The Crothians had realized something was wrong. "Captain, we've got company," Marquez said, pointing to the corridor. James gripped his stolen staff, his expression steely. "Then let's give them a reason to fear us." The three of them prepared for the fight of their lives, the command center their battleground. This was no longer just about survival. This was about showing the Crothians what it meant to face humans at their best. And James had no intention of losing. The command center erupted into chaos as the Crothians stormed the room. James, Marquez, and Gray stood their ground, their makeshift arsenal in hand. The captain's stolen staff crackled with energy, its glowing core reflecting his unwavering determination. "Hold the line!" James barked, his voice cutting through the blaring alarms. "We only need a few more minutes." Gray worked feverishly at the alien console, her fingers a blur over the controls. Her forehead was slick with sweat, her breath quick and shallow. "I'm almost there. I've locked down their internal communications and disabled their primary weapons, but I need time to override navigation." Marquez fired the Crothian plasma rifle he'd commandeered, sending bursts of blue energy down the corridor. The advancing aliens hissed in fury, their massive forms surging forward despite the barrage. "Captain, they're not stopping!" James didn't flinch. He stepped forward, swinging the staff in a wide arc. A crackling wave of energy surged out, sending two Crothians sprawling. "We've faced worse," he growled. "Keep pushing!" The Crothians were relentless, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm the small human team. Their guttural roars and heavy footsteps filled the air, but James and his crew fought like cornered wolves, every move calculated, every strike precise. Suddenly, Gray shouted, her voice cutting through the din. "I've got it! Navigation is offline! The ship is ours!" James glanced back at her, a fierce grin breaking through his grim expression. "Good work! Now let's get them off our ship." Gray's hands flew over the console as she activated the internal atmosphere controls. The Crothians' physiology required a specific mix of gases to survive, and Gray adjusted the levels just enough to disorient them. Throughout the ship, the Crothians stumbled and clawed at their throats, their strength fading as the air turned against them. Those in the command center faltered, their hulking frames swaying before collapsing. Marquez let out a triumphant laugh, lowering his weapon. "That did it! They're down!" James nodded but didn't relax. "We're not out of this yet. Gray, can you secure life support for just the three of us?" Gray nodded, quickly isolating their section of the ship. "Done. We've got breathable air, and the rest of the ship is vented. They won't recover any time soon." James exhaled sharply, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Good. Now let's see what this ship can do." He stepped up to the main console, his eyes scanning the alien interface. The ship was a marvel of Crothian engineering, its systems more advanced than anything humans had ever encountered. But James wasn't intimidated. If anything, the challenge fueled his determination. "Captain," Marquez said, standing beside him, "what's the plan? Do we take this thing back to Earth?" James shook his head. "No. If the Crothians learn what we've done, they'll come after us with everything they've got. We need to send a message, not just to them, but to every species out there." Gray tilted her head, her brow furrowed. "What kind of message?" James's grin was cold, calculated. "The kind they'll never forget." He activated the ship's long-range communication array, broadcasting a signal to all known channels. The screen flickered to life, displaying the captain's hardened face. "This is Captain James Harker of the United Nations Space Fleet. To all species receiving this message, humanity will not be underestimated. We may not have your technology or your numbers, but we have something far more valuable: our ingenuity, our resilience, and our will to survive. The Crothians tried to break us. They failed. Now, this ship belongs to us. Let this be a warning: if you come for humanity, you'd better be ready for the fight of your lives." James ended the transmission, his message sent out into the vastness of space. Marquez whistled low, a smirk on his face. "That ought to ruffle some feathers." Gray chuckled, shaking her head. "You sure know how to make an impression, Captain." James turned back to the console, his expression serious. "We're not done yet. Gray, set a course for neutral space. We'll regroup and figure out our next move from there." As Gray programmed the navigation, James leaned against the console, his mind racing. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The Crothians wouldn't take this defeat lightly, and other species would undoubtedly take notice of humanity's bold stand. But James wasn't afraid. If anything, he welcomed the challenge. Humanity had spent too long in the shadows, underestimated and overlooked. That time was over. The ship's engines roared to life, the hum of power coursing through its massive frame. James watched as the stars outside the viewport shifted, the ship accelerating toward the unknown. Marquez stepped beside him, his gaze steady. "What's next, Captain?" James's grin returned, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "We show the galaxy what it means to be human." The three of them stood together, battered but unbroken, as the ship carried them into the depths of space. Behind them, the remnants of their Crothian captors lay scattered, a testament to their victory. Ahead lay endless possibilities, each one a chance to redefine humanity's place in the universe. And as the stars stretched out before them, James knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning.